Okay, today I have an idea in mind for a kind of my version of a Halloween scene. I usually don't do things with, I don't know, although I love the iconography, but things like graveyards and things like that. But I want to do a scene that kind of is in the spirit of Halloween, but it's more just kind of the atmosphere of the overall setting. But then I'll try to throw in a little twist at the end. I have an idea for this little child walking right here. I'm going to leave the adult out of it in this case, but I'll put a little. I have an idea if you've seen that movie It. I'm going to put a little balloon in that guy's hand there, and I was just looking around for my, I had one sheet of red glossy cardstock, and I have no idea what happened to it. I might have matted something with it a while back, but I don't know, I can't find the scrap of it. I'm sure I wouldn't have used the whole thing. Maybe I gave it to my son for a bookmark or something like that. I'm not really quite sure, but that would be ideal. I'll have to take a look around. I'm not sure if I don't have it, but that would be perfect for a balloon, wouldn't it? Okay, so I'm trying to decide here. I'm going full page on this one. I really want to set up the kind of the scenario for this, and I just found the half page to not be quite as wide as I wanted to. I really wanted there to feel kind of this oppressive, kind of environment surrounding this child. Okay, this is the dirt road stamp right there. I just stamped it in a dark brown, and I stamped it in a dark brown. I would have done it in black, but I wanted to leave enough leeway for this child to show up on here. So if I stamped this in black, then that shape around the child would be the same value, and I didn't feel that his silhouette would show up as much as I'd want it to, so I went brown with that one. I'm not quite sure what'll go with the other colors around this. I might go black, but I'm not sure. Okay, so this is the way that you build a scene, okay? I usually start off with my main images. It's usually the largest ones, it's not necessarily so, but it's usually kind of the focal point type thing. So if you're stamping a cabin, a watermill, a farmhouse, something like that, it's the thing that your eye would tend to focus on or whatnot. Those are usually the things I stamp first, and then I just fill in around it, so here's some grass filler stamps, there's some rock textures things that we'll use and whatnot. There might be some bigger stamps that I'll use, but this is kind of more the focal point of it, and then I'll build in other things around it, some trees and whatnot in the foreground. I really want there to be kind of this heavy atmosphere in here, alright? So just kind of an oppressive type of environment for this figure to be walking in. A little bit ominous, right? I mean, it's supposed to be Halloween type of thing, so. Okay, let's go with the dark brown on this one again. Okay, so that road ended right there. Normally on a card-sized piece of paper, I can have that running off the edge of my card, but you can extend this out, okay, through the use of some additional imagery, okay? And because I just like getting what I get without having to go through too much or any fuss at all, I'm going to just try to avoid having to use any type of masking at all. I might end up using a little bit, but it'll be really minimal in terms of the style of masking that I do, but we'll see when I get there. Okay, so that's some large grass texture in there. It's just called grass texture. It's not called large grass texture, but I can fill in this entire area with grass around it, but I'm going to mix it up a little bit, just, to break up the monotony of textural form, I guess. So this is a rock here, so I need to stamp this one first, and then I can work some other textures around it. Why don't I go with this one, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 times. We'll see how it goes. Let's go with one more here. All right, so I mean, I'm overlapping probably a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch into my previous impression. There's a lot of leeway, you know, and tolerance in terms of your blending of it. You don't have to be an expert on it. Just it's better to overlap enough than not enough. Let me show you an example. See, if I go like, that even looks okay there, but if I go like that, okay, there's gaps in between, you know, these images like that, which, you know, in the end, it's not really going to matter. You can just kind of go on it again like that. Don't worry about getting this into the rock. These stamps have been designed to, you know, for people to not have to kind of fuss. Okay, so see, I mean, I stamped that right into that rock, but even you can't see it, right? And that's because I've really spent a lot of time on my transitions in terms of how I design the stamps. I use multiple types of nib sizes on my pens, and I order my plates a certain way so that the transition zones are a little bit more seamless, and then when we get these back into stamping form, those dots are going to be uniform enough. I don't know, that's getting real technical, but that's why these stamps are blend together as they do. Okay. All right. Now see how this kind of the center of the roadway type of thing comes down. We need to get a little bit of extra texture in there, so I'm just ripping a paper towel. I mean, this is not, you know, tedious work, and that's the way, you know, I'm sure we all like it, you know. We don't want to have to fuss in order to get the results we're going after. Now, when I say that too, it's not like, I never really go into a scene with a really hard set definitive idea of the end result, okay? I mean, I have a general concept in mind usually, but if I haven't done a scene before, I really don't have, you know, a clue of really the final result and how it'll look. I mean, it's just, there's so much variation that can take place. And I mean, I kind of like that. I mean, it wouldn't be bad to have, you know, to set out with a goal and to accomplish it 100% just as you saw it in your head, but there's so many different components, and I don't know. I like that quote, not that I necessarily see it this way, but it said that art is what takes place in between the initial concept and final result, meaning that, you know, it's a process-oriented type of quote, you know, kind of you know, focusing on, you know, the step, you know, the current step that you're on, and it leaves a lot of room for interpretation and change. You know, you can change things up if you need, you know, if you deem it necessary and whatnot. And I like that. It just, to me, it means freedom too. Okay, so I'm going to mask off some of these grass textures in here. It doesn't matter where you do it, but when you do that, it'll come up with a little bit of a rougher kind of bottom edge. Now, normally, I have these trees running off the edge of my, you know, the top of my card, so I don't worry about this cutoff zone. But this is such a gigantic piece of paper that it's just not going to make it up all the way, okay? So I'll have to do something with that up there. I'll probably just put some overhanging tree limbs or something. All right, now this one I'm stamping in black, just so it's a little bit more kind of substantial, I guess. I want this to kind of be a denser thicket of trees. Sometimes it's harder to kind of do that without doing some inner masking, because there's that space in between the trees that you have to kind of fill in. So I'll have to figure out something for that, you know, without having to go too fussy. All right, I didn't put enough pressure. This is a really big stamp. I should have stood up to do this. I'm sitting down right now, but I'm not going to worry about that anyway. All right, this is the what is this one called? Mossy covered trunks, or something like that. It's a pretty big one. And I did it so that, you know, on big scenes, although it's not quite as big enough for this scene, because this is gigantic. All right, I'm going to mask off these trees, these rocks down here, okay? But your mask is not having to stamp those rocks out and cut them out of a Post-it note or something like that. I just covered up with some paper towels like so, and I'm just going to add these in here. All right, let's give this a little bit more pressure. So I don't have to give overall pressure. I'm going top, kind of middle, and down. And my camera's like right in my face, so I can't get right over it, so I don't have really great leverage. So anyways, what I do too, speaking of this, is I have a, you know, pretty good stack of copy paper underneath there. It's probably like 6 or 7 sheets. I should have 10 sheets or something like that at least, but copy paper works really good for me. It's cheap and effective. In terms of providing a little bit of extra padding, if you're using a stamping platform too, those work fantastic. Alright, so, anyways, a couple different trees here. So what we're doing is just starting to frame off our kind of interior right in there. I mean, it looks real kind of, you know, static symmetry here. I want to offset this a little bit too. It's too monotonous right now. I mean, I have these there's rocks right here, the trees right here. It's not exactly the same, but it's, you know, it's too much of the same. Okay, let me see. By the way, I have tack and peel on this. It's this sticky surface. I forgot. Someone asked that on, gosh, I don't even remember where it was. YouTube or Facebook. I need to answer them, but all right. But see, it just provides your temporary mounting of your unmounted stamps on your acrylic blocks. This side's bare, so you can even still put your cling foam stamps on this side, you know, with this protective coating, or you can put your cling foam stamps on this side, but you always have this side right here. That's very, very tacky. See, this is a big, gigantic block, but I can see that it sticks to my finger. And when this becomes not tacky, you just wash it off with water and it's ready to go, and it's like brand new again. It's almost too tacky. I'm talking about stuff. This one's right here. It's been covered in dust. You know, you pick up these things and you put it down, and it slowly becomes a little bit less tacky. And like I said, you just wash it off with water, and it's good to go. Okay, so that's set to go. This is the smaller version of this one, so I'm going to stamp this one a little bit higher up here. It represents trees kind of farther back in the distance. If you stamp a smaller version of it. So anyways, this is just kind of setting the foundation for, you know, whatever you end up coloring things with, etc., subject matter, and so on and so forth. And that's, to me, that's where kind of things start happening. I mean, this is just, Stampscape stamps are just designed to blend in with one another in a nice seamless fashion, in an effortless a way as possible. When I design these stamps, I know that I'm going to be using them as much as anyone, so I don't want to fuss around with things. So I'll spend, you know, sometimes an extra few weeks on a design, you know, and if it improves kind of the stamping experience, then I don't really care how long its design takes to do, because it pays off in the end if you're doing a design. Plus, if I'm stamping something like this tree here, if I'm designing it, in a sense, if this I think this tree took me like, I don't know, I worked on it off and on, but it took like months. So when you do a scene like this, if you stamp it 4 times, it's like the cumulative total of a design. If you stamp it out, it's like the equivalent of, you know, a several month drawing, right? Because you're making printing instruments. So that's the beauty of rubber stamping. I would never draw this, you know, scene here, but because I can stamp this out 4 times and not work on it forever, you know, I'll do that. I love the repetition of form when it comes to rubber stamping. And whatnot. Okay, now see, I would put these behind these trees here, but it's just, I don't feel like masking off these things and stamping something in between here, so I'll put other types of foliage in there and whatnot, because I like things nice and easy. I don't want it to look like everything was like super easy and the end result like, oh my gosh, what a simple looking scene that is. But in actuality, it is a fairly simple kind of concept and layout that I'm working on. In execution, it doesn't mean that's it's it's instantaneous, but to do, I mean, especially on a design this big, but I want each step to be very simplistic in nature, right? Okay, so if I'm going to put some trees behind that kind of a, I don't know, whatever horizon line. This is the cypress trees right here. I'm just going to do some smaller types of trees, and I'm just going to mask it off like so, right? And then I'm just going to stamp this down here. Okay. Like about like that. Okay. So there's some trees at the end of the road. I mean, that's not the end of the road. The road presumably keeps going on and on. But going back in perspective, you just can't see it that way. All right. I think that looks pretty good. I'm not going to worry about all this stuff. I have these other trees and things like that I'm going to put in the foreground coming in from the edges, like this kind of overhanging Spanish moss design, like this and here and whatnot. I want things really dark anyway, too. So we'll figure things out at that point in time. I have plans in here. Plans that'll make my life easy during this process, okay? So, alright, let's break things up slightly with some additional forms too. Alright. I think I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, I am going to bring in some additional imagery into this whole area down here. But the thing that gives me kind of the most crisp impressions is if I kind of wait till I add in a lot of color into this piece. It's not going to be real colorful, but when I bring in my inks in here, it's going to get a little bit muddled, okay, because of all the tone that I'm bringing into it. So I'm just going to leave it as is, and then I'll stamp some crisp impressions back right over the top of all that color. So it's kind of it's not really a linear process. Okay, stamp your scene, then color it. Okay, I usually stamp the scene, the foundation of it. Then I'll bring in some color, then I'll stamp some additional imagery, and maybe I'll bring in some other color, so I just keep tweaking it along the way. I mean, you could just do your whole layout too, if you really want to, and then just color it in after. So you can work that way, but oftentimes I just don't know the way, the direction something's going in totally, so I just kind of allow it to happen kind of more, I don't know, incrementally or whatnot. In terms of that dynamic between composition and kind of finishing. Okay, this is a really gigantic scene, so I have these re-inkers here, and I just think this works so much faster. Just to take whatever kind of color scheme you're working. Okay, now my color scheme for this, I think I'm going to go with some kind of antique brownish grays in here. I want it to look drab and kind of, I don't know, maybe not inviting, I don't want it to look nice, I don't know, maybe there's a beauty, its own type of beauty, maybe, okay? But not, in a, like a springtime, traditional sense. I mean, I would find, certain elements to this, very beautiful, but, I don't know, maybe not happy, okay? It's kind of more of a somber take on things. Okay, so anyways, that was a, what was it? Antique linen. So the distress inks have that really kind of cool, kind of earthy, aged look, right? So I think that would be my, perfect type of tone for this. So adding this in. Okay, now I always tell people, don't think about your scenes so much in terms of natural light. I mean, you could kind of reference it for sure. You want to have some lighting in there, but I'm kind of more of the idea that we just kind of take this, whatever scenes you're doing, and kind of approach it more like stage lighting, where you're the director or the lighting director of a scene, of a stage, and you can put your lights wherever you want them to go. You don't like that light over there, then position a spotlight over here. You have multiple sources of light. Okay, so, but this one's going to be easy, okay? We have this road here. Don't tone your road out completely. Kind of leave it as a bit of a visual lead-in, okay? I mean, you can put some colors in here, but largely I'll leave this. See how it's already a little bit darker on this outside edge and lighter in the middle here? So it draws your attention where that lighting is, right? If there's a clearing and somewhere, and there's a little bit of a light kind of breaking through the clouds into a meadow clearing, your eye's going to go straight there, right? So it's no different than that. So when I talk about things like spotlighting or something of that sort, we're talking about the definition of light through the use of shadow, okay? So we're not creating light in here, we're just creating contrast early, but it represents light. Okay, so this is where my little figure is going to be walking right here. So I want it to be in the spotlight down there. I don't want it to be all dark, because we wouldn't be able to see the figure. We want that spotlight to be on our kind of star of the scene, subject matter. I know, and that would be the focal point. Maybe the star of the scene is going to be more of the atmosphere and the setting. We'll see, or the mood. I guess the mood would be, I would feel that kind of the scene mood, at least how I hope it kind of turns out, ends up being kind of that, I don't know, the overall kind of dominant, I don't know, not factor, but element within the piece. Okay, so this, I'm not taking time to do really smooth gradations or anything like that, but see, I have a pretty good coating on here of that first color. The first color is kind of to coat and saturate my surface pretty well, okay? I want to get a good coating of those lightest of colors, so I started off with a Distress Ink hue, and I'll just kind of build on it from there. Let me see what other colors I have in the Distress. I don't have re-inkers. I have this ground espresso, which I have a feeling I'll use later, but let's take a look at some other types of brown tones. Now, I kind of want this little bit, kind of a muddy brownish. Like I said, I don't want it real bright and kind of cheerful and defined. I want things kind of murky. So, I was thinking a couple gray tones would be good for that. Here's a gray Marvy. And, okay. Every time I grab for some pad, it's always at the bottom. There's my memento pads on my desk, and the gray one's like at the bottom, of the entire stack. I just stack these up like that. I mean, they're made to stack right, So it just takes up so much less room doing it that way. Okay. So one of the things that I did was I I bought re-inkers for some of the colors that I use the most, and this one was one of them I found. I really find London Fog to be quite popular in my repertoire of colors. Okay, here it is right here. I don't know, I might use the pad, but I remembered I had the re-inker for it that I just bought. So I just took a little puddle of that right now and I just put it in here, okay? A few little drops. And I'm going to just use it in the same tip that I just used with that Distress ink, okay? I mean, it's a different hue and everything like that, but I mean, it's going to be blended in right over the top of that, so why not just put it right in the same sponge? That looks real magenta there, and these sponge chips do stain, but, you know, it's not going to bleed out on there. You know, provided you washed it out. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Look at that kind of dreary, moody atmosphere that kind of provides. Look at that. It kind of dirtied it up, didn't it? This is kind of an example of kind of the moods that you can kind of do, you know, with your stamps, right? Just by changing the color scheme around will change the entire spirit of it, because I can do these trees right here in a beautiful washed kind of sunset type of you know, situation and golden light and whatever, and it will look completely different. This is one of those things, someone sees you know, a scene like this, and it's like, oh, what stamps are those stamps? Because I don't want, you know, kind of depressing, you know, stamps, you know, or something like that, or scary. I do want this scene to be look a little bit, I don't know, like I said, ominous, you know, I don't know, maybe threatening. That little red balloon in that person's hand, it's, if I didn't say it's kind of from that movie It. This is a horror movie from the books based on the movies based on Stephen King's It, which I've never read, but I heard about years and years and years ago. Okay, so here's the Marvy number 12 gray. This still has a lot of the memento in here. What I'm doing is I'm just kind of moving kind of incrementally a little bit darker and darker with this color scheme I'm working in. The color scheme, it's not real defined because I don't work in this kind of palette a lot. I just kind of figured out, let's just go for something kind of real dirty and oppressive and whatever. I mean, these aren't types of adjectives that I'm thinking about normally, okay? But it is kind of fun to kind of change your, well, I don't know, kind of your go-to color schemes once in a while, you know, that we tend to be returning to over and over again. One of my teachers used to say, not a lot, but, you know, he made a point of saying that, you know, when he looked over a body of work of yours, he can say, okay, see this color right here? He'd say you're using it as a crutch, okay? Meaning that someone probably had, you know, got some positive feedback, or they liked the results that they had using a certain color scheme or whatnot. But his point was you don't want to get locked into it, you know, so that you can just kind of continue using it and not kind of branch out and grow. And you know, so that you're able to, and you're a practitioner of, you know, other things as well, in terms of color schemes, textures, whatever, technique, I guess you can say. So for me, I try to kind of break it up a little bit once in a while and use combinations that I'm just not familiar with or comfortable with, or really the ones that if I'm really bad at something, it would be a really good idea, right? Sometimes people take kind of the opposite kind of stance. If they're not good at it, they like to avoid it, okay? I mean, if it's something that you're going to want to do, I'm saying. If you don't care, care about it, then why, you don't need to practice something, but if it can benefit you in the long run, I would, suggest, I don't know, trying something out. Something new, I don't know. Okay, so this is walnut stain. Kind of another warm tone tinge. Who knows, maybe this will kind of take on more of a like sepia type of, color scheme or whatnot. It's kind of warming it up a bit down here, isn't it? In terms of the saturation, the level of saturation and intensity. I wouldn't call this a terribly intense color at all. It's just simply more intense than the existing hue that's already been laid down there. Alright, now if you noticed, or I don't know if you did, but I'm not really taking too much time at all to color my tree trunks some kind of different color scheme. I mean, I can go into these trees a little bit with this color and kind of come up this way, and maybe that'll be good, but I tend to get much more dense in terms of the foliage and things coming in from the side in the end result, or in the final. Not the final end result, but the final, well, I don't know, final kind of incarnation. So I'm not terribly worried about that, because things are going to be covered up anyway. Okay, so, I don't know, but we can put some of it up there and just kind of continue that. I'm just not doing it in a different hue. Things are going to be kind of more, when things are in the fog or something like that, or at nighttime, the colors are much more kind of unified in terms of tone, hue, temperature, etc. And if there's kind of atmospheric fog everywhere, then kind of you get the same colored light shining on everything, so it kind of makes things a little bit more uniform. Alright, I don't know if it's really dry in here or whatever the past few... It is like 90 degrees outside, so... But it's kind of humid though, but I find this page is starting to dry out on me, so I think what I'm going to do is... so when it dries out, it's kind of grabbing, and I'm not able to spread ink easily. So what I'm going to do, just go back with any of your colors that you've already used, alright? And just kind of resaturate things, okay? So I'm just going back to that London fog, and I have a big dollop of it now. When you put it into a tip like this, it turns this into kind of like a, a stamp pad on a stick. For lack of a better description, but what do you have? You have a sponge, reservoir for that ink in here, okay? And just give it a good slathering. So, the wetter the page, the easier it is to apply those inks, because it's like sliding across like wet glass or something like that. Okay, that is really looking murky and ugly. Which is what we want in a scene, right? In this scene, at least. Yeah, that is really ugly. I wouldn't say that I want it ugly looking, I mean, that's not the idea. But, I want this kind of this, I don't know. I don't know. I keep coming back to ominous, but I wanted a bit of, there to be a bit of mystery too. kind of, you know, around the corner or whatnot, down the road, or what kind of lurks in the shadows type of feeling. Like if you're walking down this road, you want, I don't know, you might want to stay on the path if at all possible. Okay, all right. That kind of wash of London fog is really effective. Maybe I might do that for the bottom part as well. Yeah, let's do that. Now, see, this is the beauty of re-inkers. Now, see, if I didn't have the pad form of this re-inker, I probably wouldn't even bother, because if I'm not stamping some image out in this color, I don't necessarily need the pad. The pad's kind of convenient, you know, if I want a little bit of color or whatnot. But instead, when I was buying some pads, and I buy pads just like everyone else, you know, I don't carry them or something like that. And I'm a manufacturer, but when I'm buying like distressings or something like that, I'm just buying them at retail. So if it comes down to getting a re-inker and pad, or double the colors in re-inker form only, I opted for just more re-inkers and more colors, okay? Because I can always just drop it off into a, you know, my palette right here and just take it like this and apply it that way. I just want, you know, the inks that I'm just doing coloring with, okay? Not stamping with, which is a lot, you know? So I just got a ton of inks. Well, not a ton. A lot of you guys have a lot more than I do. But on my last order, you know, that I placed. Okay, so kind of adding that in, that really disappeared. It's not getting any darker, you know, with going with more London fog. It's just kind of moistening the page and whatnot. But you see the lighting in here now? I don't have it up here, but it's just kind of this, you know, this lighting, like as if a kind of a diffused spotlight is hitting down here. So that's what I'm just going to kind of go with right now. All right, now things don't change from here on, like, you know, some kind of vast changes in application. I am looking for some other colors that I can use on here, though. I'm trying to think of which way I should go. I'm trying to think if I should just move right into black now. I think I do want some other hue in here, though. It's looking a little bit too monotonous for me. And I don't want the vast changes in hue here, but why don't we go with this peeled paint? Distress ink, okay. Now this is a perfect example, too, of, like, say, Marvy. Marvy inks tend to be very bright, okay? And when I think of bright, I'm thinking maybe cheerful or something like that. So I don't want a bunch of, like, really hot tones in here. I might lay some down anyway, if I just need a touch of brightness, and then I can lay down some colors over the top of it to kind of mute it down and make it more earthy. But I'm not sure yet. Okay, so this is peeled paint. It's green, okay. Maybe it'll look kind of like mossy or whatever. I'm just using the same tip here so it doesn't look completely green, and we're adding it over that. So here this looks like over here. See the difference in, you know, hue here? It looks a little anemic now without that peeled paint, right? So see, this is where I just keep adding in some tone. Boy, that paper is getting really dry on me fast. I have to work fast. Okay, so I'm getting kind of more of the feel, I think, of all of you out in Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, or wherever. You know, if you're living in, you know, Australia, and, you know, it dries a little bit faster, so maybe get a little bit more toned down, you know. Foundation coats so that you can kind of spread things around. Actually, I really like that peeled paint, so I'm adding a little bit more. If you like it, then add more, you know, but if you add it a little bit down, you know, you can kind of tell if you're going to like something or not. And you can just kind of experiment on a little area of your paper. Okay? All right. Peeled paint. Pretty good. All right. Looks all right. And we have that little kind of definition of the road a little bit more. See, I'm just kind of avoiding going, you know, when you get darker, don't tone all of your light out. You know, kind of retain it and whatnot. Is this paper dry enough? Or too dry? Still. Let's go on with the black. All right, let me switch tips here to this one. I don't know, this black. I'm going to do this. I'm going to put a little bit of London Fog in my tip here. I'm going with a new tip here, so my tip was completely dry. And by going with a little bit of that and then dipping into my black, it'll create kind of a transition between gray and black, right? Because we have both colors physically mixing in here, so we'll see how that goes. I can't see it all. It's completely gray, I think. Let me see here. Is this tip okay? Sometimes these tips start going on me. I think I need to re-ink. Alright. I like my pads kind of medium dampness. I don't like them real wet because when I make an impression with them, I'm talking about the pads that I do make impressions from, I don't want them so soaking wet that, you know, it's going to puddle up in my tight detail within the design, so I keep them about medium. So whenever they go to dry, I'm talking about just a few drops in there. Okay, alright, that's better. Pad was a little bit dry, or a lot dry. But see that how I can spread that? It's because I have enough ink on the foundation. If you start fighting your paper, okay, that means it's not kind of moist enough. So you just take your re-inker or whatever, your pad, and just add a little bit down. In this technique I'm talking about, you know, not other techniques. And Stampscapes is not a technique, it's just a line of stamps that can be used, you know, in a nice seamless fashion, and they come together really nicely. Hopefully people don't have to fuss around with masking and whatnot. I mean, you certainly could, you know, mask and be really careful about it. Whatever you're comfortable with. Me, I'm not so comfortable with doing a lot of having to mask because I'm too lazy for that. But if you need those post-it notes, you know, and you don't like some people don't like, you know, they say, that grass went into that tree right there and it's really bothering them, then by all means, you know, employ whatever techniques you're comfortable in. Alright, so here's one side of black and the other side doesn't have it. So look at that. Isn't that looking kind of more ominous? And it's kind of creating the mood right now, right? Sometimes it takes getting kind of all the way to black, you know, to, you know, really see the kind of end result a little bit, you know. You kind of get a glimpse of the future, you know, by the time you get to a certain stage. It's like watching kids, you know, at some point in time, they're growing and, you know, look like little kids for a while, then at some age, you know, you don't see one for a while, and 6 months later, 12 months later, it's like you see someone's kid and they're like, you know, they grew a ton or whatever, and their face changed, and you can kind of see, now you can picture them as adults and what they're going to look like. You know? I don't know, that's kind of how it is with these scenes sometimes, you know, you're not really quite sure what, you know, is happening, if it's working out, you know, if it's going to come together. I certainly have that feeling sometime, or that inclination, and I still do sometimes, but I don't know, I don't really concentrate on that. I just kind of figure all I'm doing is just applying black now, and I'm concentrating on that. They say when you have kind of one eye on the future or something like that or whatnot, then you only have one eye with which to work, you know? Well, I'm just applying this. I'm just saying, to me right now, I'm thinking in my mind, okay, let's see how this streak comes out right here. And I'm noticing that I'm kind of starting to remove ink with that. So that's kind of my focus right now. And if I want it darker, then I'm going to have to tap or something, or maybe go a little bit lighter or whatever, or maybe I can let that set up a little bit and come back to it. But those are the types of things that I'm, thinking about right now. Yeah, I do look ahead, a little bit, because I'm thinking, okay, I need to do this or this or this, when I come to it. Yeah, but then I go back and I just kind of focus in on the moment. Okay. All right, now here's some little fine point types of things, okay? We have these trees right here, especially in the foreground, okay? I want the area underneath the tree, at the base of the tree, to be a little bit darker, right? Because it stands to reason that, trees or something, or any kind of large mass is going to cast a shadow, so I'll go a little bit darker down here, or a lot darker, and whatnot. Okay, see that right there? And see how that kind of casts that shadow? That's for any type of objects, okay? Any type of objects with some mass to it that you want to give visual weight to and opacity, right? If they don't cast any shadow at all, things that are sitting somewhere, cabins, rocks, whatever, trees, then you're saying basically those objects are see-through. So I try to give everyone kind of a head start with those types of issues in the design itself. So that's why I spend so much time rendering, shadows to a certain kind of a consistency and finish. I don't want so much sometime, because, we stamp the same tree during the, and it represents high noon or something like that on a nice bright sunny day, then I don't want it to be, so filled in with tones. So it's always kind of that balancing of it and getting that right. And also I consider things like lighting. I want there to be kind of a light source opportunity when people are stamping their imagery out. But I don't want it to be so defined that the light source has to be coming from a certain direction whenever they stamp those things. So that's always kind of the hardest things to do as a designer, is to make things as defined as I possibly can, but retaining flexibility for the artist, for the stamper, when they're utilizing it. Okay, so here we go there. See that? Kind of I went up the trunks like that. Look at that mood that's starting to develop. This is a little bit too light right here, right? See that? So let's come in here a little bit more, and let's anchor that tree, those set of 3 trees down a little bit with some additional tone. And then what I'll do is I'll come into that tree like so, those trunks, and kind of on the side of the tree facing the light, kind of the center. I'll leave that lighter, but kind of on the other side, on the left side of the trunk, I'll make those darker. Okay, and the opposite on the other side. It's this little tiny little subtle tweak, okay, that I'm doing here. So light is coming from here. The left side is lighter on these trees than the right side. On the other side of the light, it's the opposite. I mean, it's not. I don't have this huge definition right now. It's just kind of putting a little bit of tone up there like that. What would be really good is alcohol inks. You can just go right in there and color that too with your pens, and that would work really fantastic. Okay, but let's see, I like really doing a lot of those heavy shadows. Shadows are one of those kind of, they're kind of a underrated kind of element for all types of stamping. Like word stamps, I think look really fantastic if you add you know, a shadow stamping of that word stamp, kind of a little bit off center, something like that. It gives those things weight, and suddenly just by doing like a simple extra impression, what you're doing is you're creating lighting within a piece. And things like that can go a long way. It goes a long way in a subtle way, though, you know, at times. I mean, it's such a small little thing to do, but it can bring everything alive in terms of the space. All right, see this right here? See, I'm kind of adding the shadow in here, and it's kind of making these objects a little bit more three-dimensional. I am turning this stylus tool on edge doing this, in case I don't have to go like that. It looks a little bit more threatening and ominous now, huh? Okay, let's go in here. As this sets up too, I've already gone over this, but I was going to say as it sets up, it's still a little bit wet, okay? See how dark it is right there? Watch this. It's kind of lighter, right? So I'm just trying to build this up because I really want it dark up there. I don't know. I kind of have to, if you tap it like this, you're building up ink on the surface, okay? If you wipe it in, you're kind of wiping it off a little bit. So you kind of have to tap it in and kind of let that set for a while. Although I do like those little streaks, but I don't know, you kind of have to work with it. You do want kind of this little temperamental thing happening because that means that you've used enough ink. And inevitably, the thing that kind of makes you start wiping off some of the ink, sometimes it's also the factor that allows you to blend colors in so easily too. So, you know, you can have it both ways, but you just have to kind of allow the inks to dry. I kind of wiped across these trees, and it just wiped my color right off the trees. There's so much, it's the London fog underneath this Marvy ink. It's not the Marvy ink that's doing this, that's making it, but when the page and the pulp of the page gets so wet, as you apply additional tones, because it's not saturating and absorbing back into the pulp of the paper, it's the ink is kind of floating on the surface right here. I mean, we can wait for it to dry and set a little bit more, you know, for there to be some kind of, you know, evaporation within the pulp of the paper, and which will allow this, you know, that whatever current color you're working with to stain the scene a little bit more. But I don't know. I could pause this video. I don't feel that, you know, I'm not going to do that. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell, but then, I don't know. I'm enjoying working on this piece. I don't want to stop. Because this is when it's really starting to come together. It's kind of, I'm starting to get to that mood I'm going after. Look at that. Okay. It's still a little bit too bright down here, but I'll do something with that. Okay, so, okay, that applied pretty nice. I'm getting a little bit darker. Okay, it's, all right, yeah. It's getting nice and dark for me over here, so that means it's setting up. The ink is, the moisture is starting to really evaporate. I like to go with a pretty good vignette on most of my scenes, but on this one I think it'll be extra dark, just because of the very scale of this piece, but also because of the nature of the kind of the nature of the spirit that I'm going after, the visual spirit of this piece, you know, and the occasion. Actually, this is allowing me to go much darker than I thought I could, at least in this point in time. It was really kind of wiping off very quickly, but Yeah, look at that. This is where things start to change too in terms of my concept of other stamps maybe that I was going to use in a piece, what I was going to use in a foreground, whatnot. For my initial kind of loose concept. You can use just a wadded up paper towel or something like that. I've used that in a couple of my previous lessons after not using something like that for years and years and years. But when things start getting built up like this, it really helps to have some kind of sponge applicator, something that's going to hold your ink that you can just, when you tap it, it's kind of squeezing out on the paper. Because again, if I go like that, see how that removes that ink right there? I mean, that's not bad. Actually, that looks pretty good. But if you want it to get darker, you know, sometimes it's just hard to get it darker. But see, I kind of like that streakiness there. It looks like I don't know, it looks like some kind of bleached, you know, process right there. All right, let's go a little bit darker. Sometimes I'm a little bit too conservative in the retention of, you know, light within a given space. Sometimes I think I should have taken it a little bit darker, but I don't know. Sometimes I'm so focused on kind of the lighting aspect of things and the retention of light that I just don't take things as dark as I, you know, maybe could have for, you know, the betterment of the piece. Sometimes losing a little bit of light might help to make things kind of moodier, you know, so that there's not such a bright light. Okay, so I'm coming into these trees a little bit more, or a lot more. I thought maybe that's too bright, you know, at the end of the road. Those cypress trees in the distance. Okay, wow, this is quite a bit of black ink. It was a good thing I re-inked that black ink. It's making it so much easier to apply. Okay. There we go. It's a little bit too light in here, but let's add in some additional imagery, okay? Can possibly make it look much richer in terms of the textural forms that we see within the given space. Let's make it a little bit darker at the end of the walkway, or end of the path as far as we can see it. Alright, so let's take a look at some additional images. Alright, now one of the things that I like to do is I like to add in some extra texture in the form of, I don't know, all kinds of things, but one of my favorite ones is these little rocks here, okay? So let's go with two different sizes of them. This is just called tiny rocks. Let's see. It's a little bit too big for my block here. That also has tech appeal, so I'll put it at on a diagonal like this. And we'll put some of these rocks down here in the road. Okay, let's do it in a couple different tones. Okay, let's go with the dark brown that I stamped out, you know, all that grass and path in first, okay? Maybe I'll go for like some second impressions. It's like third, fourth impression, fifth maybe. Okay. And then, why don't we go with the smaller version of it here? And I can do that in dark brown as well. Go for some multiple impressions so it kind of gets lighter as it moves up into the light. So darker in the dark areas. Impression, impression, impression. Lighter with like the fifth impression right back in here. So it kind of goes from dark to light. Okay. And why don't we mix it up a little bit? Why don't I do some black impressions with this smaller version? I can even put some of these up into my grass area just for a little bit of extra texture. Actually, I really like this little one so much, I'm just using it everywhere. I don't know if we'll be able to see it everywhere I just added it, but I don't know. Even if you don't see it as a standout type of thing, I think it kind of, the overall piece kind of resonates with very subtle forms, you know, if someone's looking at it. Okay, so we have this right here. Okay, see those little rocks like back in the distance? You know, like designers, you know, if they're designing some house or something like that, a lot of times they'd like to have some continuity between one room and the next or whatever, so it could be some kind of textural form, some sort of pattern, and especially like color. So having some of that texture kind of running back there and in the foreground, I think, you know, it brings this whole kind of area together a little bit. Okay, so let's add in some additional forms in here. Okay, so here's this kind of dead tree. I like having some kind of living, both, I don't know, dead in my pieces. Not all the time, but I don't know, I just find it kind of lends itself to kind of a spirit of time. And it just, I don't know, from a textural form, it just creates some, you know, some variation. Okay, so I'll put this in the distance. I'm just masking off the bottom of it so it doesn't look like it's standing in concrete or something like that. Okay. See that right there? Back there. See how, I mean, it's subtle. I mean, it just adds a little bit, right? This is one of those stamps, too, that I can kind of do that out in the distance as well. I'll put this between these trees right here. See that right there? It's just, I don't know, that little extra bit. And there it is again right there. Okay. And I have other types of elements like that. Let me get the larger version of that one. I haven't used that one for a while. Okay, here's the larger version. It's called Leafless Limbs. Used to be one of my favorite stamps because I would use it in the foreground for so many scenes. It's because it kind of, you know, in the size of a quarter-page card, it usually ran from foreground, midground, and background all in one. So it kind of bring a little bit of continuity to all three sections because it, you know, it's tall enough to be able to handle that. Okay, so on this one, let's go about right here. All right, doing it just in black. Yeah, I'm holding this down longer because I know that area right down, like in these corners right here, really got wet, okay? So I'm going to need this ink to transfer over to one. If you're stamping wet into wet, sometimes if you pull it off too early, it creates like a vacuum, and the ink on your stamp just comes right off, you know? So you kind of hold it down a little bit longer. And I can kind of see it. That shadow area back there is really dark, so you can barely see it. Anyways, it's there in spirit. Okay, you can kind of see it like that if it's, see that right there? But visually, it's very subdued in terms of its, I don't know, noticeability, or I don't know, whatever you're saying. Visibility, not noticeability. Okay, I like this form, though. Okay, so I'm going to mask off this tree right here. So this is the extent of the masking that you'll ever have to do, you know. 99% of the masking time. I'm going to have this tree kind of in back of that tree trunk here. I just want some of these forms here on this side. Okay, see that right there? Isn't that fun? You know, it just kind of breaks up the base of the tree a little bit too. So all those little things kind of add up to kind of a, you know, a nice and fun overall. All right. This is called Spanish moss. I'm wondering if I want to add that one in there, or if I want to go dense with a kind of more unified. I think I want both. I have some other branches, you know what I'm getting at. I can go in low like that. I want there to be this heavy canopy to give this scene kind of this oppressive type of feeling, like a lot of weight coming down from that side. Alright, so this is the type of thing that I'm not quite sure of. Not that I have to be 100% sure on anything that I do, but I usually have a pretty good idea. This one's kind of 50-50. You know? Okay, alright. Now, before I get into these ones, this is what I always forget when I'm doing these lessons here. I need to get into some additional touches before I get to... When I start to move to VersaFine, VersaFine is, you know, it's a black pigment ink. Well, the one that I have is black. But I can't touch that VersaFine for, you know, right after I stamp it, or for a long time after I stamp it, so I don't want to start getting into some other touches and finishing this piece without having taken care of other things, because I start smearing the VersaFine, you know, working with this. So, okay, so here's what I'm thinking, just in terms of doing a little bit of tweaks in here. Yeah, I'm looking for some other type. I want to just kind of darken that in a little bit more. I'm just kind of cleaning off one of my tips here. I have some of the what was that green one called? Peeled paint. Okay, the peeled paint is in this thing, so it's going to be some fusion of tea dye and peeled paint. Okay, just getting a little bit of that extra kind of tinge of... Actually, that looks pretty good. That tea dye is warmer than I thought it was going to be. Can you see that? It's kind of adding a little bit of a... It's adding surprising brightness to this too. I mean, it's not really bright, but it's just brighter than it was in the beginning, so... Or not in the beginning, but before I applied it. So actually that's looking pretty good. It's changing the intensity a little bit in a couple areas. This area right here looks a little bit anemic, so let me get some tone into that area. It's kind of interesting when I bring this over when I put this over the peeled paint looks greener. I think it's because the inks are tending to dry dull on me. Now a spray will bring that right back, but I guess it's giving me kind of a pretty clear notion of what intensity will kind of be revived once everything gets kind of dry on here. Okay, so that's what we have right now. Let me take a look at this. Okay, I'm going to compensate on my camera right here for the exposure. the scene looks a little bit lighter than what it is. Okay, I just knocked my camera exposure down by 1. When I start with a white piece of paper, there's so much light coming back at the camera, I have to really compensate for that. Okay, so I think some additional grass at the base of some of these trees might be interesting. Alright, let's add some of these reeds down below. Because these, these longer grass blades are coming out of grass, I have this paper towel here, like that, okay? I'm using more than I thought because I think it looks pretty cool. It's giving me something crisp back into something kind of a little bit muddled and undefined. Alright, so that was the small version of that. Let's go with the larger version of it now. As I'm coming down like this, it represents things that are closer to me, okay? So I can work scale a little bit more. I don't have to, but it just kind of adds that extra little element of variation. And again, we have that continuity, in terms of visual form. Smaller things in the distance, larger things in the foreground, but of the same shape, though. So stamp smaller things in the distance, larger versions in the foreground. So suddenly you're a designer, as well as a a stamper, because you're working with color, continuity of texture, form, distant, far, whatever, All right, I went crazy with that. I didn't think I would do that. That might be the most reeds I've ever used in a piece, but look at that right there. So it follows back up that way. Okay? So adding the dye-based ink types of impressions, and let me get to this. Gosh, I might have to wait for this to dry too. I want to bring in some of the Hero Hues pigment inks in here because, hey, kind of a foggy, kind of misty, ethereal, whatever, atmosphere is kind of conducive to the spirit of this piece, right? I'm adding a little bit more of this black ink. I can tell where my fingers have touched it, because I'm kind of touching into wet ink right here as I've been doing this. So I think I need to allow this to set up a little bit. I have my fingerprints all over this piece right here. I can tell with the glare of the light on there. Okay, but alright, I'll leave it like that for right now. I think I do need to give this a half an hour. I think it deserves me to do it the right way. I usually don't like heat setting, and it's not going to take too long for this to set up. Maybe it's somewhere like 5 minutes or something of that sort, so I should go get a drink too. It's so hot in here. A little figure right in here with a little red balloon, but I need to do that whole canopy up here too. I might add a little bit more hue to this too, so allowing this to dry, those reeds around it so it doesn't smear will be a good strategy, I think. All right, take 5, take 10 or something like that on this piece. Okay, I am back after about 5 minutes or something like that. Didn't give it too much time, but I wanted to get back to this. And let's see, it gave me time to kind of think about some additional textures and forms that I might want to add in here at this point in time. And I thought it might be a good time to stamp the figure in here because I need to add some things to it. Just this little boy here. I'm trying to be careful not to stamp out the arm of the adult. Okay, I'm just gonna wipe that off a little bit. Okay, something like that. All right. I'm going to try to put him in the clearing here without too much texture around him so he really stands out. The lower you stamp them on the, this road, kind of the larger everything seems by contrast. I guess, I mean, it would probably be, closer to like out here in terms of scale. That would be kind of the right proportions. Right now I stamp them down here and these become like gigantic sequoias or something like that. But I found that to be fine because the whole idea of this kind of piece is about this kind of intimidating kind of feel. I don't think this little figure in here is kind of intimidated. They're just walking down this road by themselves with a balloon. But, for the viewer taking a look at this, I want it to kind of be, I don't think it is going to be, but I want it to be slightly unsettling, in terms of, I don't know, the visuals here. I'd rather, I don't know. It's probably, I hope it looks kind of cool too, but I don't know, that's the overriding type of thing. All right, now I'm just testing that branch in there if I still want that in there. I think I do. I want things to kind of be closing in on the figure. I don't know, it could be I don't know, they're walking down that little road in there, unless that, that figure represents a spirit or something like that. It could represent kind of this fearlessness thing in the amidst all this other thing. I don't know. I guess it kind of piece leaves, kind of leaves room for the interpretation. I think people will interpret, most people will interpret a certain way probably. But I don't know. Okay, so I'm looking around right now, and I'm wondering if it's time to start adding in a little bit of pink. Pink, where'd I get that from? Pigment ink. There we go. Pigment and ink. Embellishments. Alright, where are my... Anytime I start working on a gigantic scene like this, I start losing everything because I got piles of stamps and media around me. And I don't have a gigantic workspace, so... Alright, so this is pigment ink, and I've talked about this in other scenes and whatnot. You can go ahead and see other scenes. I'm not going to talk about this too much, but we don't want to add this in big blobs. So you really want to kind of ink it up and kind of get a lot of that out of your tip right here. This is just a standard Q-tip, and it's a cotton one. It's not kind of an acrylic one. And I want to add some kind of atmosphere into this piece here. So it's kind of that misty, foggy atmosphere, which kind of is right at home in kind of a ominous type of scene, especially any type of forest scene. If you watch movies and whatnot, they have this kind of that fog machine running in the background. It's like in every, I don't know, TV show and whatever, they always have that fog machine running in the background. It makes for a kind of more interesting atmosphere and gives light something to kind of reflect off of, and it kind of just makes kind of a static kind of a background. It moves, so it just kind of makes the area come alive, so I'm guessing that's why they always use it. You see it all the time, though. Okay, so I'm just kind of adding this. It's kind of really effective where light meets dark. Okay, I don't want to add this over here, it would stand out too much, you know. So I kind of start adding this around these areas where there's light, because where it's light, you're saying that light is coming in there. So if there's kind of moisture in the air, it would stand to reason that's where you would see it. You would see it where the light is coming into the piece. If there's all this darkness over here, there's no light, you know, there's not enough light to reflect off of anything, so you wouldn't have kind of illuminated moisture in the air. Okay, so adding this in, I want to color that little child too, some kind of color. Let's go in with a, I'm trying to think of what color I want to do them in. Let's give them a little bit of a green shorts or something like that. Okay, and maybe a stripes on or something like that, white and green or something of that sort. So I did a little bit of green in there. I figured it would match kind of this little tinge down here of green. Let's give them a little bit of a brighter green too. So in the shadows, I can kind of add a little bit more green. So instead of just coloring the whole thing, you know, we can kind of make it a little tinge. This one's a little elm green, you know, and give it some variation. It's going to be kind of the focal point of the scene, right? Your eye's going to go directly to this child right here. It doesn't matter how big the scene is. If the scene got 3 times as big, chances are you'll go right to it, especially when I give them a little red balloon, of course. But okay, so this child right here, if there's shadows down here, you can kind of add in some additional shadow form. I have a shadow drawn into the design too, so I'm just kind of going in there and reiterating that. See some of these rocks down here. You can kind of give some of these rocks a little bit of a shadow, you know, with the use of kind of a similar hue pen color here. It just kind of makes things a little bit more kind of rounded and dimensional, adding these types of little elements into the piece. Okay, let's see this right here. Yeah, do I have any dull? Yeah, here. This one is a melon. Spearmint, okay. Let's see if the melon, yeah, see this melon right here is really, really pale. Can you see this? I'm sorry. So this is really pale right here. Alright, so if I'm going in here and adding a little bit more of this into the shadows, like so. It doesn't read as like melon on white pieces of paper, but it just kind of gives it a little bit of extra tone, okay? I really like these almost 10% values of whatever hue they represent, because I can kind of really, in a very subtle way, fill in some additional little areas with these really pale values of alcohol inks. Okay. And you get really detailed with them too. Not in a big way though, it's really quite subtle. Let's see, I think I had a blue too that was really good. Pale blue, it's really light blue. And I can just add some of this here and there in some of the lighter areas. It just kind of gives a little tinge of that color. Alright, and by the way, that's a Le Plume permanent. It's just alcohol ink though, okay? Alcohol inks, I don't know, I don't find the quality between them to be too different from one line to the other. Now the tips on that one, I don't have a brush tip though, which would be kind of nice, but I don't know. The chisel tip isn't not too bad in those pens. Not the Le Plumes, but I have some shuttle art ones too that are 50 cents, you know. Okay, putting this little figure right here in a little bit of kind of a foggy mist, okay, see how he's kind of in foggy mist right now? I don't want to do the whole thing, I just want to do kind of like his feet, where he's walking along. Can you see that? Can I see how that kind of puts mist or fog at the base of the tree? I can put some right around here into these on the side of the road. Hopefully it kind of adds a little bit of kind of atmospheric conditions or mood. I think people are, when we're made kind of aware, this is just a cotton ball right here, I think when we're made aware of the space in between objects, like during a sunset when all the moisture in the air kind of comes alive. I'm just kind of blotting this off right now because it's really sopping wet right there. I just want to add kind of thin layers of it. Boy, there was a lot in there. I kind of want to get to where the consistency is nice too. It's nice and soft application like that. Alright, I don't want big blobs coming out. When we're made aware of those kind of the space in between objects, the air around us, like at sunsets, you know, all the dust in the air and moisture kind of become illuminated with golden light. When you show up at a lake early in the morning or a pond or whatever, it could be a grassy field, and we see that, you know, that fog in the air, something like that. There's a certain atmosphere to it, you know. It's moody, isn't it, you know? And it takes on a different kind of emotional quality. And I think that's my I don't know, take on it is when we're aware of the space in between us, you know. We're walking through things, we're in contact with it, and you know, like sunsets or something like that, it's a beautiful golden light. I think that's why people kind of, your mood changes, right? We're in kind of that space and whatnot. And it's not just empty space, it's, you know, you're amongst kind of that setting more so because we're in contact with all of it. Alright, so, boy, I was zoomed out too far. I'm adding it down here, so there's this kind of this pathway of fog that we're aware of. Okay, maybe it's over here too, but we just don't see it illuminated. So it kind of makes kind of a visual, textural path along this way, okay? And I think it kind of sets that kind of interesting mood, like I said. Okay, let me try a little bit of this up in the sky as well, where there's light. I kind of blot it off like this with my finger because sometimes I add too much. I'm adding this with a gigantic applicator too this time, so a lot of times I just use a little Q-tip. But sometimes to get into bigger spaces, or to cover just a vast area, it's just easier to do it with this cotton ball I'm finding. I just started doing this like with the cotton ball fairly recently. I'm a slow learner. It takes me a while to kind of figure out, oh, why don't I just do that instead of this other process, and that'll save me 15 minutes, you know? Okay, kind of blotting off that tree in the background, see that like that? Putting atmosphere at the base of it kind of changes the mood back there, doesn't it? Doesn't it seem more full that way? It seems kind of strange. It makes it look more full, yet I'm kind of dampening out some of the form, but it just kind of, it puts something in that space, and it kind of varies it a little bit. We can still see it, but it's more kind of complex in a subtle way, you know, I guess. Okay, so that is that. Now, why not? This is a really big piece of paper, and I'm taking my time to do it. Why not I try some additional forms in the form of some kind of tighter detail. I don't want things too crisp and shiny and whatnot, okay? Down in my little details. but I might want to have a few. Okay, so a lot of times I have like glittering, shimmering light and things like that reflecting off of, a water surface or reflections on trees and whatnot, but this is a more muted type of, so much glare on this piece. There's so much happening out here in terms of that kind of more muted atmosphere, so I don't want some like super bright lights, but I do think that, a few little textural forms in this area will give it a little bit of variation. Okay, so I'm just adding these, see these rocks down here, they're kind of those oval shapes, and I'm just kind of going in this lighter area, adding some more of those types of little dots and whatnot. It just seems more textural. Seen it down there? And then when you zoom out, and it's more subtle, but these little areas like that are really kind of nice and I believe very effective. Okay, now let's take a look at some of these trees here. Maybe I will put a slight highlight. Okay, I'll just go with a couple dots here and there just to kind of bring it out from the background slightly. And on this other one, I'll put it on the other side of the tree. So left side of the scene, right side lit, and the right side of the scene I'll make it left side lit because the light is coming from the center of the piece. Okay? So these little dots like that, I mean, it's very subtle, but aren't those kind of fun? A couple little dots here and there. The darker it is, I just use less dots. Okay. Alright, it's time, I think, for what I was thinking about before, these bigger tree forms. It kind of looks like a hand kind of coming into, right? It's kind of reaching down and it'll drip down kind of towards the figure. Alright, let's make some room here. At least I'm not working on the 11 by 17 pieces. That's when I really need to clear out more space when I'm doing those ones. Okay, so versifying. We're going with a very thick ink. I need something to really stand on the surface and in the foreground of these pieces, and I need it to stamp right over the top of the dye-based inks, Marvy inks, very well without it becoming more translucent and see-through. I want foregrounds to be in the foregrounds, not to kind of merge into the background visually. Okay, we got a big one here. It's a pretty long stamp. At least 6 inches, I think. Was it 6 1/4? I can't remember. It's called Spanish Moss Left. Okay. So see that? Yeah, it looks pretty good. It's kind of matches with that back there, and I have a lot more to come in here too, maybe over here. Maybe I'll come in with another one. This one will be just completely invisible, but I'll put it in there anyway. It's invisible because it's just so dark over there. And it's just stamping kind of black pigment ink over black. A really black dye-based ink. I didn't think it would get so dark over there, but it did. Especially when I used that memento underneath. Sometimes the memento kind of, it seals things off a little bit too much sometimes, where I can't build up that black ink, but I don't know, for some reason it did allow me to do that, and I have a feeling it's because of how hot it is here. Okay, that was the left side one. This is the right side one. And maybe I'll come in like this. I don't want it at the same level. That would be too much symmetry. Okay, so I kind of do it a little bit offset. when the pads are smaller than the stamp, I usually go pad to stamp. I find it easier. Okay, filling in. I feel the oppression. I don't know if that's exactly the right word I'm going for. I don't know, the more I kind of I stamp at the scene, the more I think maybe it's about kind of facing the fears or something like that. I mean, that kid is not scared. Unless that kid is the spirit, like you'd be walking down this road and someone says, hey, there's this, sometimes, people see this little boy, on the road or something like that. But he doesn't look too kind of I don't know, ghostly. Okay. All right. This is the leaves stamp. It's just kind of a leaf texture. This is another reason why I said I'm not going to worry about those tree trunks not reaching up completely, because I know I was going to kind of cap it off on the top here with some additional image forms. I'll come in on the sides too with some of that. I'm using a little bit more than I usually do, but I really want this to be quite full up here. Okay, so this is what this looks like. I know you can't see it too well here, but let's go up here and see. See that? It's just, I've stamped it so many times over the top. Look how dark that versified black is. And it really looks like it's standing out against that dye-based, those dye-based impressions back there. Okay. Yeah, see that right there? It's really quite dimensional, that versify. Pigment ink sits on the surface of the paper. Dye-based inks are supposed to stain it. So, it really looks, I don't know, I find it quite dimensional. I didn't start using Versify. I've had this Versifine for a long time. I don't know. I didn't use it too much. It takes a little bit more time to dry. I don't know if that's the reason why I didn't. It dries pretty good though, and I don't know, it probably depends on time of year and whatnot, and relative humidity and all that, but it dries faster than I would have thought for pigment ink. Okay, I'm kind of just, I'm ended up doing kind of, I don't know if I'm going to do this entire circumference. I don't think so, but, oh, actually I think that's enough right there, but I just stamped a few more impressions out here. Did you see that? Over here, and there's that Spanish moss. You can really see it reflecting kind of the, see there's that branch guy. Look how that really sticks out, huh? I think I'm almost done here. be cool. Since we have this out, why don't I do some impressions in, or I did, in dye-based inks black right down here. And then I put that misty fog over the top of it right here, right? Okay. See that? Where the light is coming. But let's put another of the pigment ink, you know, impression in front of that. So I think we'll create some additional depth right in there because the mist isn't right in the front. And this pigment ink is just a lot darker than the dye-based ink. Okay, so we have this. I mean, it's subtle, right? But it's kind of a good way to sandwich in that misty kind of touch right there. See that right there? And I can do the same thing over here. I'll put another impression right in here. I'll put this in here. Now, chances are this grass would be out this way, right? Because this road, this grass would be over here. But this is kind of like the narrative here. It's like when someone kind of walks down a pathway, it's like nature kind of closes in around them or something like that. But like I said, maybe this is like some fearless kid and it's this kid's forest or whatever, you know what I mean? He's going down there without a care, so he walked over and to the local 5 and dime. Actually, it wouldn't be a 5 and dime out. He walked to this to the little gas station or something like that, and he got himself a balloon, you know. And there he is walking home. Back in the days when you didn't need to worry about, you know, a kid out walking by themselves through the woods. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't have to worry about people, but I guess he didn't need to worry about, you know, wolves either or whatever. Okay, now I need to cut out his little balloon, a little red balloon, and I think we're done here. So, I think the atmosphere kind of, I think it you know, I think it achieved. We got to kind of the feeling that I was going after in this piece. Surprisingly so. Sometimes I don't always get it, you know, get what I'm going at. It comes out completely different. But this one's a little bit closer to kind of the initial kind of general concept. Oftentimes my scenes don't come out anything like what I expected. But this one did pretty well. I was surprised those trees and things like that, as dense as they are, look pretty good. So it kind of put some of my designs to the test. But I'm working with a larger piece of paper too, so there's more leeway, you know, in terms of overlaps and whatnot, because there's just so much more space. If I don't like something, then I just cover it up. Where there maybe on a smaller quarter-page card, those scenes come about much faster, just because of the space that, you know, are involved. But when it comes to larger scenes, I mean, kind of in theory, they're almost a little bit more flexible in terms of what you can overlap over something. Okay, maybe, I don't know, you know, because there's just so much other space to, you know, kind of create your focal points and whatever your subject matter and whatnot. Okay, so I need to cut out a small little balloon and then we'll finish this one off here. Okay, I think I found, excuse me, I think I found a piece of paper that'll work. I really wish I could find my, a piece of glossy red. I mean, that would have been perfect, but this one's a metallic red right here, but I put that down there and I thought, I don't like that tone, but this one right here, it's a little bit of a warmer red, and I think it would be ideal there. This one has a bit of texture that, you know what I mean, it's not my ideal. I mean, if I spent extra time with this, it would be good to kind of put, you know, some kind of little balloon and put some kind of a spray sealant on it, or one of those little gel things, or I forget what they're called, micro. It's not the micro bead, but anyways, something that would kind of make this seem a little bit more three-dimensional. Wouldn't that be cool to kind of do that, you know, to put like a three-dimensional thing on there? Not really coming out real big, but you know, where it would, I think it would be kind of a nice little touch, because after all, this little red dot is going to end up being kind of the focal. I need practice with this. This doesn't look good right here. I don't want to use a hole punch either. I don't want to make it look round. I want to make it look like, you know, like teardrop. This is like doing like surgery. I don't think I like this one. I might have to have some practice here. See, there's a little balloon right there. Let me see how this is going to look. Something like this. Chances are it'd be a little bit offset too, because he's, you know, walking with it, so it's not just, it doesn't just hover like this, it kind of drags behind a little bit, so maybe I'd put it like this, you know, at a bit of an angle, maybe. Which is important, because I was just about to draw that going vertical, but I don't know if I want that. Is that too big or is that too small? Like, I should probably try a couple different sizes. Let me do a couple fine trims on here. I think I'm dehydrated because looking at this tiny thing and cutting it, it's like, it's making me feel dizzy. Okay, let me see this right here. It's not too bad. It's not too bad for hand cut, this tiny little thing. Okay, let me see here. I think I changed my mind. I think I'm going to take the extra little time. I think I'm going to spray seal this with a Krylon crystal clear to give it some shine, some sheen, and what got on there? Something got on there. Anyways, oh, the pigmenting's down there. Okay, so I'll just be sure and use the other side of it. Anyways, I think I'm going to have this. I need to be careful with this pigmenting down here because it's wet. So let's see. I don't want it going too much at an angle. The kid's walking slow. I'll put it a little bit more vertical. So I'm going to put this little string kind of hanging down a little bit, but I'm not using a ruler. I'm just going to kind of go more freeform like that. Can you see that at all? See it like that? Anyway, okay, I'm going to spray this little tiny dot. Seems like a waste, but I think it's going to be the focal point of the scene, so might as well. Okay, I just went outside and I sprayed that little piece of paper with the Krylon crystal clear, and look how much darker it got. I forgot about that spraying aspect, about how it can kind of saturate and change the color. Most of the times I'm thinking about inks or something like that, and how they darken and saturate it, but it did this little thing. This is the paper that it was, too. Okay, but anyways, what I found, I was just walking back over, I was thinking, okay, that's not going to work, but look at this Costco ad, right? But look at that red right there. That's the red that I think that I want, you know? Really stand out in there. So let's cut into the Pirate's Booty Skinny Pop ad right there. So I didn't think about that. I guess we can look at magazines and stuff, or ads for some color schemes that we might be going after. Okay, so we have there. Yeah, that's the. It's shiny too, right? Okay. A printed piece. All right, I'm not going to have too many different. Maybe I should draw this here. I think that'll be easier. Okay, so there's my balloon right there. So it'll be a little smaller because I'll try to cut on the inside of the lines here. So in cutting, we turn our paper, not the scissors. It's easier when you turn the paper. Okay, there we go. Okay, I think that worked okay. I think it's a little bit too pointed. Let me get rid of that little, or cut down on the angle a little bit. It's usually not a point either. I'm not going to bother doing the tie. That's too microscopic for me. Okay, so I have that little red bit right here. I just have a standard glue stick. Okay. Got a lot of glue on there. And ew. I got a lot of that glue on the front. Okay, no problem. Now it's all over my fingers. I should use a X-Acto blade or something just to place that, but okay, let's just go like this. Okay, there we go. I'm going to position that up slightly while I still can. There we go. I might put a little reflection on that balloon too, with a little gel pen or something like that sort. All right, so Costco red balloon. All right. All right, so there's our little balloon. I don't know if I want to keep it graphically like that or if I want to put a little bit of a... Where's that little dot that I just did? I lost the other balloon. That could have been good. Oh, I just tossed it out. Here it is. I'm going to test on this little dot here if a little tiny reflective red will look good on there. Maybe. It won't show up quite as much on another one as it does on this one, but I'm just talking about these tiny little reflective dot like that on there. I think it would incorporate it into the scene a little bit more by doing that. Gosh, this scene is insane in terms of the amount of foliage in there. Okay, let me see. Okay, I'll just do it one tiny little. Go to there. Put a little reflection up there. And I'll put some more dots around here just to kind of incorporate that in with the surrounding area. So I put that little reflective type of thing right on there, like so. And these little tiny little speckles of light, you know, here and there. Okay. And I think that is it. Oh, as I was doing that, I was thinking, I might want a little bit of, a couple little, get this stuff out of the way. Different colors of little dots in here, just for kind of a subtle little, this is like some kind of a violet. Just for a tiny little subtle change or embellishment in a different hue. It kind of goes with green too, you know, that kind of that purple, fluorescent lime green color scheme that you see at on Halloween kind of merchandising. Here's a blue here too. All right, let me hit this up too a little bit more with my white pigment ink, which is gone now. I've been moving everything around. Where'd it go? Oh, come on. I'll just use my color box. Okay, I'm going to put that little figure in a little bit more mist. The pigment inks all dry a little bit lighter, or no, darker, sorry. They become more translucent than right after you apply them, so you kind of have to go in and kind of reapply and build up if you want it to be, you know, pretty light, or as light as you think it's going to be after you apply it. So sometimes, that being said, sometimes you add in a little bit more than you think looks ideal, just because it will dry darker. Okay, so putting them in a little bit more of that mist again, like that. It's kind of a little bit more mysterious, maybe. Put the figure back there and put a little bit more along this pathway as well, here and there. I can condense it a little bit more in some areas. It doesn't really matter where. I'm not doing it like a targeted thing. I'm just kind of oscillating it, you know, between a little bit thicker application and a little bit thinner, to maybe none in some areas, okay? And I think that looks better than just everything uniformly applied. I think it's the most effective when you kind of contrast it against a thick and, you know, when there's thick and thin applications. then you're playing kind of the crisp and diffused against one another in various areas. You stamp out your impressions very crisp, but then you kind of diffuse them in some areas and you make them a little bit more lighter in value, so that it becomes less defined. Okay, it's all about textures, soft and sharp, basically. Where you put some pigment ink over it, becomes soft. But we don't want it all soft because it would look more effective having that kind of range of visual texture. But, okay, so don't let that complicate you, or complicate things for you. Basically, it's easier that way because we don't have to do the same texture everywhere within a given space. You just add a little bit to it, okay? And it just becomes an easier process and it doesn't have to be in any specific area, just as long as you put it somewhere. In other areas, you don't have any of it, okay? So like down here, I'm putting a little bit around this rock, okay? And then right next to it, I don't. But it's not as if, oh my gosh, I made a mistake, I put it right there instead of right there. No, it's just, it's wherever. Just don't put it everywhere in the same degree of application, okay? All right, so there we go. Okay, so let's take a look at what I was talking about down here. So you can see that some of the pigment ink is right in here, but it's not right there. Okay. And some right around here, I applied it a little bit thicker in some areas around those trees. Here's some, here's none, here's some, none, So you can see it right here. There's none right there, but there's a little right there. There's none right there, a little right there. So it just keeps oscillating back and forth. All right, so let's take a look at it all the way around. Let's take a look at that. Look at that pigment ink, how that pigment ink really stands out. Okay, let me close up this ink pad. Last thing I need is to get a bunch of ink where I don't want it to be inadvertently. Okay, so look at that top right here. Look how dimensional it VersaFine looks. And look at that black dye-based trees against that black VersaFine there. Look how much dimension there is. I mean, before we stamped these VersaFine marks up here, that looked really dark back there, right? But now look how much darker that VersaFine is. So when you do it like that, that really gives it some nice depth within kind of a very narrow range of values. If I made this really light, this would really stand out. But even when you get pretty dark like that, that ink there on the surface really kind of stands out. And we have the Spanish moss. We have the variations of reeds down here. See that down here on the road? How rich that road is and how we've kind of carried that out right here. It didn't look... Now, a lot of this does not look, or did not look like it was going to come together when I first stamped things out, but you just kind of add in your additional colors and media, whatever it might be. It could be pastels. Wouldn't pan pastels be kind of interesting in there for those kind of amorphic shapes in the background like that? But, your media will bring together whatever you kind of stamp out. It came together enough, but where it didn't in some areas, it's just been left as is because I know that people are going to bring in media, so I try not to draw things and design things that's going to interfere with variation, okay? All right, so anyway, boy, that is really glary there. I'm not enamored with my hands, when I have my hands like this in photographs. It's because I need to bend it like this, to get that studio lighting out of there so we can really see what it is there. But anyways, there's my little, I don't know, first scene for holiday season. It's kind of unconventional a little bit, but I don't know. It's kind of in the spirit of like It, that horror movie or whatever. I saw this balloon going. I was thinking, oh, I can do that to a scene or something like that. And this vision of a road came to mind. But anyways, so you can do these types of things like this. You can kind of make things seasonal and whatnot, just by changing kind of the spirit of kind of the atmosphere and scene. So this to me is like the Halloween spirit without going into anything too ghoulish or whatnot. It's just kind of, I don't know, it's a little bit more Twilight Zone than, you know, Halloween, you know, or something like that. But, yeah, like I said, it's kind of in that same spirit. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the scene. I certainly enjoyed stamping it out, and I don't know, I haven't really done something like that before with that little balloon before. So it was kind of new for me, and I don't know, working on these larger format scenes too is still relatively new for me. I've done them before in the past, but I've only done a handful over the last, you know, 20, 30 years. So I'm just kind of starting to get into it a little bit more and more, but I'm starting to see more of the possibilities of kind of the larger format here, even though this scene can be stamped in, you know, a quarter-page card. I mean, this would make a really great scene right here, you know. A quarter page is like about that big, right? You know, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. But, you know, this extra space in here just allows for additional kind of interpretations and kind of an increase in whatever statement you're trying to make. So if it's going to be some kind of like a ominous, spooky atmosphere, then you can just make it much bigger doing that, and it's doing the same exact techniques. You just have to apply a little, you know, or I don't know, I guess it's 4 times more ink or whatnot, but once you kind of get it flowing, the inkers really came in handy, you know, to kind of expedite the process a little bit, and to get the gosh, I can't get that glare out of here, you know, kind of to get that foundation made. And remember, after all this time in this video, I did go in and I inked in a certain color, stamped over it, or I stamped the scenes out, inked in a certain color, got darker, but it was kind of drying on me really, you know, too fast. So you just go back in with those lighter tones again and just reapply it over the top, and then go back to your darker tones and just kind of reapply them in there, and they'll spread around it and blend so much easier for you as a result of having kind of that pulp moist and sealed off, I guess you can say. It's not really sealing it off the pulp of the page, it's just kind of wetter, so it just kind of it becomes a much more surface-oriented exercise of spreading inks out, as opposed to kind of fighting it because it's grabbing, you know, your applicator. So use more ink than you think you'll need, and you'll be set. Even I didn't apply enough on my first go-round, so I just used so much more of that re-inker fluid, and that set things up nicely. So, okay. Questions, drop us a note in the comments section. If you like this video, hope you like, share, and subscribe. And again, if you have any questions on media or whatnot, check the information section of the website, or just drop me a note in the comment section below.